Hello and welcome back to the ROI channel, the channel that's obsessed with the art and science of return on investment and a little bit of adventure as well. Today, we're fortunate to have a favorite guest, a return guest, Mr. David Klefeker from the Sovereign Nomad. He's a man that's been there and done that all the way around the world in various markets, in various countries. And it is my pleasure to have him back on the show. Disclaimer, guys, anything that we say today is obviously just our opinion and what we think and what we might be doing, and we might change our minds. So obviously nothing is to be construed as investment advice. It's your responsibility to do your own due diligence and seek the appropriate professional advice for you. Now, David, since we last spoke, a lot's been happening where you are. You're still in Turkey, as I understand. What I might do today is start off at Turkey, and we'll see what has and hasn't been changing since we last spoke. And then we'll talk about some of the opportunities that you see in various real estate markets around the world. So how are things in Turkey, my friend? You've been a busy man since we spoke.
Yeah, yeah, it's been great, man. It's been really good. Turkey is, yeah, it's one of our bases. Outside of kind of any other investments, we've kind of chose Turkey as our kind of second home in this side of the world. I think Turkey's got a really bright future. I love the culture. I think if we can get the inflation under control, and the lira can stabilize, they can, continue to develop their own energy, because obviously they're a net importer of energy. So that obviously, causes things to get a little bit out of hand in terms of pricing. But yeah, I think it's got a really bright future, man. And so we put some solid roots down here in Turkey. But yeah, lately I've been kind of running all over Turkey, looking at different properties, different areas, just kind of in prep for the next couple of years. I mean, if you look at kind of Turkey overall, the property market has definitely kind of gotten ahead of itself a little bit, I think, over the last year and a half, maybe by overall, 15, 20%. So I
You and
think
I were talking off camera before about certain examples. Maybe give a few examples of some of that coastal property that you mentioned to give people an idea of exactly how popular Turkey has been becoming.
Sure, yeah. So like down in areas like Izmir, Antalya, specifically the kind of coastal small towns of Antalya, like Kaş, Olympus, Demre. These places have seen 150, 200% increases in valuations in some areas, which is just absolutely nuts. In large part due to all the Russians coming in, flooding in. I mean, historically, it's been a pretty big Russian hotspot for vacation, but obviously, since the war, a lot of Russians have been trying to escape out of Russia and get any kind of capital they can out of Russia, and putting it here into Turkey. One, because it's familiar to them, because they already know Turkey, they've already been coming to Turkey for a while, but also because the CBI program, with the Citizenship by Investment program, was $250,000. And it pretty much allowed you to invest anywhere in Turkey, which was pretty amazing, and way better than most CBI programs for the real estate piece of them. But then it increased to 400,000, which kind of stemmed the flow of international investment a bit, and that was back in June. But it still has a ton of people coming in, renting out villas, renting out entire 3 or 4, 5, 6 packages of condos for their families. We've got lots of Europeans coming in, trying to escape the winter in Europe. Yeah. So we were down there actually just in October, and typically the season down in the south lasts from, like, let's say May till about September, and then it just completely dies off. I mean, it goes down to like 20% occupancy, sometimes 10% in some places. But we were down there, and I mean, the hotels are still 80% occupancy. All the cars are rented out from all the rental agencies. So, I mean, it's still rocking down there, surprisingly. And there's still tons of building going on. I think I was telling you this off camera, but we were looking at a penthouse for about $250,000. Beautiful views. I mean, coastal views, sunset, the whole thing. This is about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And we just looked at it now, it's about 1.3 million. So that's one of those. It's like, that one hurt. That one
That
hurt.
would have been
So
nice. That would have been
yeah,
nice.
note to self: anytime you see a penthouse for 250, just buy it.
Just buy it. Yeah.
And then just wait.
So are people
So
moving there because it's going to be a warmer climate over the winter? And obviously there's huge question marks around the ongoing security for natural gas to heat Western Europe. Is that mainly the driver, or people are
yeah,
just want something different? What's leading to this traditionally quiet time of the year being like 80% occupancy rates that you mentioned?
yeah, I think the main point would probably be just the overall geo arbitrage of it, right? So I mean, people can come here. Obviously, we have plenty of gas. Erdogan's done a pretty good job of securing a nice flow of energy from Russia through his negotiations for like the grain deal that he did that was out of Ankara. He's done some pretty smart moves, being able to kind of play both sides, Europe and Russia. This
Traditionally
whole
been the advantage of Turkey, right? It's right in the middle ground.
exactly, and he's played that pretty well, to Turkey's benefit. And so yeah, so you've got, I mean, there's no possibility of any gas being shut off. It's pretty cheap comparatively to the rest of Europe. Even before the major gas spikes in Europe, even prior to 2022, it's always been relatively cheap here, versus the rest of Europe. And then obviously, the overall cost of living is 30-40% cheaper than the rest of Europe, especially like, obviously in Germany, Spain, but even in the cheaper parts, like in Portugal, Greece, it's still significantly cheaper. And it's just a beautiful, I mean, you've got, even in the midwinter, say like January, I mean, temperatures are going to get down to maybe 60 at most,
That's not
whereas
terrible.
in Europe, no, it's not at all. And so you've got, I think was that in Celsius, maybe 15, 16
Yep.
at the coldest. But otherwise
That's
it's
not too bad.
absolutely gorgeous. No, it's absolutely beautiful. So that's, I think, another part of it. And then just there's, no matter what you think of Erdogan and how he runs the country, you're not going to really see any major protests or civil unrest.
Yeah, no, I
So
imagine he's got that under control.
yeah, pretty well actually. So yeah, if you're looking at all these protests and civil unrest in Europe, then you're like, okay, I'm told when I cannot use my own heating, and then if I want to buy any extra, it's going to come at a massive premium. And then there's social unrest. I mean, there's riots going on all the time. So yeah, I think Turkey all of a sudden just kind of got elevated and the spotlight on it, and they're like, wait a second, it's literally an hour and a half flight from where I'm at now, and it's absolutely gorgeous down there. So yeah, I think that's what's driven a lot of people over. And you can easily get a tourist visa from any of the EU countries for 90 days. Well, it's 100, I think it's 160-day visa. And then within that 160 days, you can come and go up to 90 days.
At a time. Okay, so for an EU citizen, so you've got your EU passport, you can come
Yeah.
in on a tourist visa, you can stay for 90 days, and then what, you can leave for a weekend and then come back up until
No,
60
sorry.
days?
So you have a block of 6 months. And then
Okay.
within that 6 months,
You
you can stay within for up to 90 days.
out of that whole block, and then you got to go
Then
out
you got
there
to
and
wait.
come back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Then you got to wait for that 6 months to expire, and then you can technically come back in and
Okay.
do it
And
all.
what about the digital nomads of the world, the options traders of the world? Can we get a digital visa of some sort, or we got to just play the tourist card and then kind of hop around for a little bit?
Yeah, so it's definitely gotten a lot tougher recently, especially with so many people pouring into Turkey. I think Turkey's immigration department's got pretty overwhelmed. So used to you be able to come in on a tourist visa, and then if you wanted to stay longer, say up to another year, you could just apply for a tourist visa, which is just a temporary residency.
Right.
And it was pretty easy. You just show them like a year lease, a year's worth of insurance, local Sigorta insurance, and that's basically it. And then as long as you didn't come from like a kind of
A
a less,
blacklisted, yeah, or a
yeah,
yeah,
blacklisted place, then you're typically pretty good to go. But then they stopped giving year and they just started doing 6 month. Sometimes they even just give 3 month
because of
residencies.
the demand for people realizing perhaps all of a sudden Turkey's not a bad place to be, politically
Um,
neutral, can play both sides, better weather than Switzerland, a lot cheaper than Switzerland, with a lot of the
exactly.
advantages.
Yeah, exactly. So with kind of all that being said, you had a lot of people that are coming in on tourist visas and then getting the tourist residency and then working, which from a lot of other countries. So it's a lot of you had obviously the Turkish officials didn't like that so much.
Yeah, okay.
So
So I'm guessing that's not on the cards anymore. They've scrapped that. Yeah, okay.
no, you can do it, but it's you're going to get a maximum of 6 months, and you might be able to renew it up to 2 times, 3 times. A friend of mine just renewed theirs for the third time, but they had to have a little bit extra more paperwork. They needed some cash in the bank. They needed a notarized bank statement. They needed a notarized lease. So instead of just giving them a typical lease, you have to get it notarized by the owner of the apartment.
Okay.
So they've definitely gotten a bit more strict on how to how they're giving out those residencies. If you want to do something a little bit more permanent, then you can do a property purchase of 75,000 or more, 75,000 USD.
Right.
And again, you pretty much have all of Turkey to buy with it, right? So if you want to go down and get yourself a little condo down south, which there's plenty of condos still available for that price range, then you can do that and you get a permanent residency. And
Okay,
that
so that
permanent
would be
residency,
permanent residency, not citizenship. We'll talk about that next. So a 75K, and the turnaround for that is what? Once the property ownership changes hands, you're good to go.
maybe like 3 months
That's
for
pretty good.
processing time. Yeah,
That's
it's
like
not bad.
not much longer than a standard settlement for property here in Australia.
Really?
And you
Oh,
get a
okay.
permanent residency. And so let's talk about these, nice little 75Kers. I presume they're out of the capital a little bit. And is there a market for like holiday rentals? Can you Airbnb these things? What sort of yields could you get? Because that could
Sure.
be something for someone looking to plant a flag, but can't come up with $500,000 for the citizenship by investment yet. Is that like
Mhm.
the next best thing?
I would think so. Yeah, and like if anyone's looking to like plant roots in Turkey, I would actually tell them to go that route because obviously the next step up is the $400,000 CBI program,
Okay, so
and
a
so
couple of
that's
penthouses back in the day. Uncle Dave could have got you in, guys. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I would say not to put that same 5K into Istanbul. I would say look at either Izmir, which is growing quite a bit and is still fairly undervalued for the city that it is, for a coastal town, for the size of the city. It's a very, very cool city. It's you can still get some really good deals down there.
Okay, so that would be
Yeah,
a 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment, or what would we be looking at?
one bedroom.
A one better. Okay.
Yeah, but a decent one. I'm talking about like maybe a 5 to 10 year old building.
Wow.
Might be able to get a small sea view, peekaboo view, but
Yeah.
nothing crazy, nothing
So
with.
entry level in a city of, sorry, how many people roughly?
And somebody will have to check me on the numbers, but I
That's okay.
think
We can
two.
look at Google.
Yeah,
2 million, did you say?
yeah, 2 million, I believe, 2 to 3
Oh my
million.
God. So, okay, a smaller city than Melbourne, but in Melbourne, 75,000 is not going to buy you a car park. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not going to buy you a 1 bedroom
Not
apartment.
gonna buy much.
And here
Might
you're
buy a
saying,
park bench,
wow, yeah, if that. And here you're getting, maybe you can smell the ocean at least, even if you can't see
for
it.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. At least you can hear the seagulls.
Yeah,
So
okay. And
yeah.
so is there a chance of, if it is going through this sort of flag planting process and you're not going to spend a heap of time there, is there a chance you can rent that out at a decent yield? What would that look like?
100%.
Or it's, yeah.
100%. Yeah, you can definitely put it on Airbnb. And so for a $75,000 apartment, you can your nightly rate will be around $35 to $45 a night. The occupancy on that would be somewhere around, conservatively, maybe 65%.
It's not bad.
For Izmir. No, it's
Like
not
for
bad
a
at all.
holiday rental, you know,
Yep. Yep.
decent
So
amount.
yeah, like comfortably, you'd probably be able to squeak out a 6.5, 7% yield.
Okay.
And now, if you want to spend a little bit more, then you're definitely going to get a pretty decent place. Like you can easily spend, or you can easily get a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment with a bit of a sea view for around 150,000.
Okay.
So
That's
yeah, so
okay.
decent.
So that's
Yeah,
that's
and
the
then
next level up. 2 better, 1 bath, maybe sea view. Wow, in a city, major city of 2 million people, and in a market that's very, very steady, no real leverage in the system, and you're getting a permanent res. Yeah, there are worse deals out there than that for sure.
absolutely. And that actually you touched on a really like important point is, when you're looking at the overall Turkish market, that's one thing that I like about the Turkish market is that it doesn't have these massive boom and bust cycles, which you get in places like Australia or the US, where it's highly levered, tons of debt in the system. And so any change in rates is going to send the market one way or the other,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And that's why
But
we've seen that, like the Royal Bank of Canada, we've seen the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, they say they want to follow the Federal Reserve, but then it gets to the point where they're, instead of hiking at the same pace of 75, 50 basis points, they're just sort of saying, yeah. In Australia, we say, yeah, nah. And that means because
yeah,
either you're just going to collapse the whole economy, and then the question becomes, well, what happens to our currency? Like, at least we've got commodities that we can flog off to China, but I mean, there can be an argument. The places like New Zealand can end up having like this Pacific peso of a currency, and all of a sudden the Turkish lira doesn't look so bad. But anyway, that's an important point. Not much leverage, so for long-term investors, getting a 6% yield, gross yield. What's the tax situation like for a foreign investor? That's something we should think
yeah. So the taxes are not pretty in Turkey for sure. But if you hold it longer than if you hold it longer than 5 years, then you don't pay any capital gains.
Okay, what about on rental income?
On rental income, you're going to pay around 20%.
Okay, net. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've got a decent account, I presume you can, your depreciation, amortize. Oh, well, there's not a lot of amortization if you didn't take a loan out, but there are some things that you could do, and it's not the end of the
Sure.
world. In terms of that permanent residency, how long then is there a pathway to citizenship that way? I'm presuming it's a little bit, well, it is going to be longer. What does it look like, and what sort of criteria would you have to satisfy if you couldn't go straight out and drop 400K to get your passport and some properties? You had to go this slightly longer route. What does that entail?
Yeah, so it's actually not a bad route. I mean, it's a pretty cheap route if you're not wanting to go the CBI route. So it's about 5 years, and then you can apply for naturalization. And then that process, obviously, you're going to need to show that you spent time in Turkey every year for the last 5 years, preferably 6 months of the year every year.
Okay.
But if you're making
That's
it your
fairly
base or
standard.
one of your bases, it's not too bad. And it's obviously Turkey is super well connected to the world, right? I mean, you got
Absolutely.
one of the nicest airports here, IST, which is one of the brand new airport, and I mean you've got direct flights to LA, Houston, Caracas, Venezuela. So you're pretty well connected to the world.
That's very well connected.
And so so you'll definitely need to know some Turkish. So you've got 5 years to kind of pick up a decent amount of Turkish, maybe 20, 30%. So proficient, right?
Okay, so surely in 5 years you can manage that.
Oh yeah, I would think so.
Hopefully.
And then that's it. And then you basically just kind of go through that naturalization process, and it might take 6 months to a year. So within basically 6 years total, you could probably get a passport here.
Okay.
And it
Again,
might be
fairly
the way to
standard.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
In
might
terms
be
of
the
the
way to
permanent
go.
residency, do they have any like physical residence requirements to keep that? Or once you have your property, your permanent res, and you're good to go?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Wow.
And there is talks, like, so basically Turkey's going to have elections next year. And it's kind of 50-50 on, depending on who you talk to, if Erdogan stays in power or not. If he does not, the opposition, I think, is at least talking like they want to do away with the CBI program.
Okay.
So we'll see what
Seems like
happens. I mean, obviously every country is always kind of, talking about it, especially when the local populace is starting to get upset about how many foreigners are coming in, and
yeah, especially if they're getting
and
blamed for the inflation. Yeah.
absolutely 100%. Yeah, exactly. So so they might just kind of be placating the Turkish citizens, but that is a possibility. So if they do that, then obviously the next best thing is having that permanent residence that you can then use for your path to citizenship.
Yeah, that could be worth more than its weight in gold in the future, which is why you want to set up these bases, guys. And Dave from Sovereign Nomad can definitely help you with that. Let's talk about an interesting conversation I had this morning with a gentleman in Venezuela. You mentioned direct flights from Turkey to Caracas. The Twitter sphere is talking about Venezuela potentially opening up with its strategic oil reserves being very handy to places like the United States. And the interesting part is that Venezuela still has a lot of sanctions from the US, and US investors it's very difficult for them to get in there. But if you had been smart and listened to Uncle Dave over the years and got yourself a Turkish passport, not only would you have a penthouse potentially in Turkey, but that passport would mean you could enter into an emerging market or a frontier market such as Venezuela and operate for all intents and purposes as a Turkish citizen, which I thought was fascinating. And I thought of you straight away. Are you looking at any other place around the world? Maybe not necessarily Venezuela, but where else has caught your attention since we last spoke?
Yeah, actually, just to stay on Venezuela for a second.
Sure.
It's interesting that because you made the distinction between the frontier and the emerging market. Yeah, I would definitely say that Turkey is kind of your emerging market, and then Venezuela is definitely a frontier market for sure. You kind of see what Turkey has such a well built out economy. Tons of manufacturing and infrastructure, whereas Venezuela is obviously still kind of grappling with the last 10 years of a massive economic collapse. And so they need everything from infrastructure to an actual manufacturing sector. So there's, loads and loads of potential there, but it's going to be a very, very, I think, bumpy ride. But I think
a ground floor opportunity for a reason, ladies and gentlemen, because you are starting literally on the ground. Yeah.
But I think we had mentioned this in the last podcast. It's definitely, in my opinion, it's an asymmetric bet, Venezuela. I think and actually I have to give it to Ladislas of the Wandering Investor, who we were having a conversation one day on my stoop here in Turkey about a year ago, and he kind of mentioned it, and that kind of piqued my interest at that time, because I was looking at different places. That my thesis was this: if we're heading into a secular bull market for energy, specifically oil, coal, for the next, say, 10 years, what property markets are going to benefit from that? Yeah. So obviously, looking at like Colombia, but then when he said something about Venezuela, I started kind of doing a deep dive in Venezuela, and I was like, well, wow, this could make a lot of sense if all the right pieces fall into place.
The ultimate call option, isn't it?
An ultimate call option. Exactly. And there's a lot of big ifs, and there's a lot of hurdles that Venezuela is going to have to go through. And it's definitely a high risk. So that's why, I would, the way I would go into Venezuela would be to either buy land in very premium vacation places like, say, Isla Margarita or in Caracas, and then just sit on it. Or maybe
development potential play.
Exactly.
That's something.
Yeah, like a land bank or something. I definitely would not do what I've done here in Turkey, which is find like older properties and renovate them for a number of reasons. Number one, obviously, they don't have a manufacturing sector. So whatever supplies that you're going to need for the renovation are going to be astronomical, and it's not going to make any sense.
Yeah, try importing them into Venezuela. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, and the labor market is just not there either. I mean, I think Venezuela over the last 10 years has had 6 million people flee out of that place, right? And so, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think Caracas itself is 6 million. So you have the entire city of Caracas is basically just vacated Venezuela. And so, yeah, it's going to be a while for them to be able to build up a solid manufacturing sector, a solid labor force, skilled labor. But again, that's where, some possible opportunity lies. So
that's a really astute observation. And therefore that makes you lean more towards a different strategy, different market, different strategy, land banking, where, okay, if you got the title to the land, you can wait for the infrastructure to build itself over time, for that land to become more valuable or developable. And then what are you, for someone like you, you've got the skills maybe to develop it yourself, or if the value went through the roof, maybe you sell it to a developer and let him have the headache of development. Is that the plan?
Yeah, exactly. Or you could also just VC with the developer. So you could just, maybe fold in your equity into the deal. And in that way, you might be able to get around some of the capital gain taxes, because taxes in Venezuela are not pretty either. So you might, you know what I mean? So again, you'd have to obviously run this all by, proper guys, but that is kind of the idea that I'm playing with for Venezuela specifically.
Okay, interesting.
And
what about?
You want to make sure that, and you want to make sure that you're not you focus on the premium places, the nicest neighborhoods in Caracas, the nicest spots in Isla Margarita. You don't want to be trying to play with, an up and coming neighborhood in Venezuela.
Yeah, that gentrification might take a while. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's gold. That's absolutely gold. In terms of other places around the world, I mentioned to you last time, it may not have been on the podcast, but I mentioned that some parts of Western Europe, although they appear to be a disaster at the moment, I asked for your thoughts on whether you thought it was a good time to get in at the bottom, or if you thought that it was still too early, you would be catching a falling knife. What are your thoughts on Western Europe in general? Are there any pockets that are value now, or you still think that, the EU's raising rates, there's all this crazy stuff happening with the war and energy and sanctions, that you just would maybe give it another year, 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, I really want to see something happen with with the energy crisis, with the ability for the EU to secure its energy, and kind of for energy prices to stabilize. I was looking, I don't know if we discussed this last time, but I was looking at Montenegro. That's a very interesting spot. Super stable, beautiful views, great price per square meter, really strong rental demand for Airbnb, like short-term rentals. So that was one place that I kind of have my eye on, and I was actually planning, a trip probably in the next month or two. I've got a couple of spots actually that I'm heading to. UAE would be one, and then Montenegro would be another. And UAE is an interesting one as well, in terms of just what they have going on. Possible
Dubai got smashed in the real estate market like almost 10 years ago now, right? Like there was a big drop in value. George Gammon, he went in pretty hard at that stage. So where are you looking? Where are you looking in the UAE, and why the UAE?
So Dubai,
oil, I presume.
Yeah. Well, what they're doing now, and I'm still looking into this, but so I used to live in Kuwait about 10, 12 years ago. And so Dubai was like kind of like my weekend getaway.
Is there anywhere you haven't lived?
A lot of places. But Kuwait is definitely not one of them. And this is when I was there for about 3 years. And so Kuwait's a dry country, right? So no bars, no restaurants, but no bars, no alcohol. You can definitely get it, but it's
don't advise that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't advise that. You can, go talk to some dude and he opens the back of his trunk up and he's got like just jugs, of indiscernible liquids in them. And it's like, it's a quick way to the hospital. But Dubai, I was going there for a while, and yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, what they've been able to accomplish in the last 15, 20 years is absolutely extraordinary. Infrastructure and the business, and now they're also kind of trying to build out their tech sector as well. They've got a couple of now visa schemes where if you set up a business, your company can be based out of UAE. You can get a permanent residency, and this can all be done within like 3 months. And with that permanent residency, obviously you can come and go as you please. Your business can be headquartered there, and there's 0% income tax in the UAE. So it can actually get pretty interesting. Something kind of similar to what Panama has.
Yeah.
Right. So
is it easy to set up this local company, or you've got to have a certain amount of local employees, directors?
No. So there's a couple of different ways you can set it up. But it's really easy. You can just get it, one guy on the ground can set everything up for you. And then once everything is set up, you just fly in, do your biometrics, and then you're done. And then I think you have to fly back in to get your visa, your residency, and then that's it.
Well, okay. Yeah, that's even easier than Panama. Panama, now you have to go through provisional residency. It's basically the same thing. You set up a local corp, but then you have a provisional residency, and then you renew it after 2 years, and then you get your permanent residency. So it's just an extra step, probably due to the demand, I presume. Okay, so are we talking real estate in the UAE? Are we talking?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, again, so the only concern I have about the UAE is if you look at what happened during the pandemic, it basically emptied out, right? Because the Emiratis, or like the locals, only make up a small percentage of the actual population of Dubai, and it's mostly all expats, right? So if something happens where everybody wants to flee back to their home country or their country of preference,
it's going to be a ghost town.
It can turn into a ghost town pretty quick. So that would be my only kind of devil's argument against UAE. But the corporate setting up the corporation, getting a visa or getting a residency out of it with a 0 income tax is pretty interesting. And so at that point, it actually makes sense. You don't really need to buy any property at that point.
Okay, so yeah, so from a residency perspective, that certainly is interesting. And then Montenegro, due to join the EU in 2025, is that the story, or is that Serbia and people just presume Montenegro is going to go along with it?
No, they've been saying that Montenegro could possibly join. I mean, I wouldn't invest there based on thinking that you're going to get an easy EU citizenship. Right. But there's talks. So it might be just kind of an added benefit. So if you do go in and you're able to get your citizenship in Montenegro, then you could potentially have an EU citizenship in a couple of years.
Okay. And then from an investment standpoint, how does the real estate market of, say, Montenegro compare with the likes of Turkey? Are we still talking a mainly all cash market, euros, I presume, as opposed to local currency? And
yeah, euros. And there's tons of really beautiful new developments that they're doing in Montenegro. There's definitely not the same amount of like transaction. The volume is definitely not what it is in Turkey. And
so does that give you an opportunity to negotiate a lot more if you're a buyer, or not really, because there's just no leverage and people they sell at the price they want and you either meet it or you don't?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I would say you probably have a lot more leverage going into obviously a place like Venezuela, or potentially, if you continue to have this liquidity drain, then you might be able to get some more leverage, potentially negotiating leverage in certain parts of Turkey, especially with like the developers that have overextended themselves, which I think is what's happening now. I mean, they've just been developing like crazy. And so a lot of these larger developments that have been happening kind of in the outskirts of Istanbul, I think are going to see some cracks and some issues throughout 2023. And so I think you will see possibly 20-25% reduction in current values in like mid to late 2023. So you can
Okay.
pick up, potentially you can pick up some really nice places outskirts of Istanbul, but beautiful brand new developments.
Okay. And then if we compare that to Montenegro, is the opportunity, I've heard a lot about like the coastal properties in Montenegro.
That's where
What does it take to buy, say, the 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment? How much are you looking at there? Can you finance that? And does it lead to residency / citizenship options?
So in terms of financing, I think you can, I think that some developers are doing like development financing.
Ooh.
So where they put you on like a, yeah, exactly. But in terms of like a regular debt market, I think it's going to be more of just the cash, all cash. And you can pick up a nice, 2-bedroom, one bath, sea view for 150, 180,000. Your rental yield, if you do like a short-term rental, could be anywhere between 6 to 7%. So it's not bad. Yeah,
Okay,
not bad
so
at all.
quite analogous there.
But again, you're not going to have, I think, the same year-round demand that you have now happening in Turkey. So I think
Because of the fluctuation between the warmer and cooler climate time of the year.
yeah, that the overall geo arbitrage of like being able to come down, bring your entire family and live at a 30-40% discount to anywhere in Europe. So
yeah, okay, so for a holiday maker or a vacation maker, you're going to lean towards Turkey because you're going to be able to take the family there. It's going to be that 30% cheaper. It's going to be warmer. You got more time throughout the year in which it's a nicer experience in which to do so. Okay, that makes sense.
And if you don't like the heat of the summer because it can get pretty hot, then you just go up north and hang out along the the sea. And I mean, they've got beautiful ski resorts up there, great summer spots to vacation along the sea, along the coast up there. So yeah, there's so much to Turkey that you've got options. And that's something that's one of the reasons why we're looking at like a bike, a multi-city thing here in Turkey, is having a condo or an apartment in Istanbul, and then having a nice little villa down in the south.
So, okay, smart way to play it as per usual. So we've got UAE on the list. We've got Montenegro. Venezuela's kind of on the back burner, keeping an eye out on a call option if you make some quick gains in crypto and you want to roll that into another specky. Anywhere else that you're looking at, and then we'll talk about where people are using your services. So anywhere else on the radar?
Yeah, I was looking. It's funny what's happening now or it's interesting what's happening now in Brazil. I was looking at some farmland down there because obviously Brazil is like number 2 or 3 in terms of having the most fresh water in the world. And there's still some absolutely gorgeous areas that you can get for.
You got to tell me all about this. This is really interesting from like an energy commodities focus. Brazil seems to be super cheap at the moment. So are we talking, because Brazil is a massive country, where are we talking in the south? Are we talking in the north?
Yeah, Florianopolis, around that area. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It's got great infrastructure, really a large expat community, great services, nice hospitals, great tourism demand. And then just on the outside of that, you kind of, inland, say, 50 miles, you got some beautiful, beautiful farmland, or some beautiful land that you can cultivate and kind of turn into whatever you want to turn into. But now with the recent political shift, I'm kind of taking a step back and letting that kind of cool off, see which way they go, and then maybe take a closer look at that maybe in 2024 or 25.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And I'm noticing you've got different types of strategies for assets in different environments. So what you applied for Turkey, you don't necessarily apply for Montenegro, you don't necessarily apply for Brazil or Venezuela. It really will depend on the individual market and hence that potential opportunity. What about Portugal, a lot of people talking about Portuguese real estate seems to be a
Mhm.
tricky one from, not that I know a lot about it, seems to be you've got a lot of supply versus demand. I don't know if that's taken your interest as much. It seems to be cheap property, but cheap doesn't necessarily mean it's any good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Portugal's seen a massive boom over the last 5, 6 years, especially from retirees,
Mm.
families coming from the US, looking to reduce their overall living expenses. Again, in some instances by 30, 40%, just depending on where you go in Portugal. Now, Lisbon is obviously going to be way more expensive than, a lot of the places inland or even up the coast. If you go, up maybe towards Nazaré. That's a really beautiful area. It's got one of the best surf spots. It's got, I think they claimed the largest wave ever surfed in the world
Okay,
a few years back.
there you go.
So that's a cool spot. So I think Lisbon is definitely overvalued at the moment.
Right.
It's got it's got kind of ahead of itself. But I think if you go about an hour north or an hour south in these smaller towns, you can find some solid value along the coast. Now, obviously, all this coastal property is not included in their golden visa program, right? So
I
if you're
see.
looking to do so if you're looking to do the golden visa at say the 280,000 or the $350,000 level, then you're gonna have to go inland in low density areas, and pretty low density, like villages that are pretty quiet.
So they're trying to repopulate those areas, similar to what Italy has a huge population problem in certain areas of the rural parts of the South, where that whole you can buy a house for $1 type of deal, but there are all sorts of strings attached that you got to build it back up. Okay, so that's to attract people to those areas. So
But if you
maybe
want to spend the 500,000, you can spend the 500,000, and then you get a little bit more options in terms of where you can buy. But they've really reeled in most of the coastal areas in terms of the options that you have for the golden visa. But I still think, I mean, you can go into Portugal, get a D7 residency, which is just a 1-year residency. You put 20K in the bank, or you prove that you have enough income to take care of yourself. Again, you got to get the insurance and make sure you've got a 1-year lease and do all the kind of paperwork that you need to, but super straightforward. You get the D7, and then you can renew that every year. And as long as you spend up to 6 months per year in Portugal for 5 years straight, then you've got a path to citizenship. So that's kind of like the budget man's version of the golden visa.
and then you're in the EU, and then you have options to whatever else the EU has to offer. First thing, okay, that's interesting. Last question before we wrap it up. Very random, putting him on the spot, guys. Argentina, there's been a lot said recently, very topical when it comes to real estate. I've spoken twice with Bowtie Mara, the man from the shadows. And has that ever been a market that's taken your fancy? I mean, some of the real estate there just looks like ridiculously cheap for anyone that can get US dollars into the country. Is that a place that you would potentially be interested in, or why not?
Yeah, I've never been to Argentina, but I have looked at it a couple of times. It as you say, I mean, if you just on paper, if you're looking at
That's definitely what it is.
just like, yeah, it's incredible value, great rental yields. It just the current, the history of capital controls
It scares the hell out of everyone.
yeah, man, you've got $1 million in the bank, and all of a sudden tomorrow, you've got a bunch of Argentinian dollars in there, and it's worth a third of what it was yesterday. So, yeah, I think that the historical actions of the government are the reason why I'm not jumping into Argentina. Now, look, if that all changes and they do a major shift, away from what they've been doing the last 10 years, 20 years, and they start to get a little bit more foreign investment friendly, and they start to put in some guarantees and where you're not going to wake up tomorrow and all your money is going to be
Build
turned
some
into
confidence back in the international
exactly.
investment community. Yeah.
Then for sure it's worth it. Yeah, and then it might make sense at that point. Because Argentina is an amazing place and it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's I actually love Argentina, Uruguay, and actually also Paraguay, probably a little bit more, for just kind of, and then the south of Brazil for like a nice off the grid farm that you can just go to. So if shit really does hit the fan, and we've got some world, WWW3 things going on, then that's the first place.
Pack it up, boys, and we're heading to the jungle out of the way.
Yeah. So if shit really does hit the fan, you know where to find me, somewhere down there.
Where you won't find you. Very good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I hope you were taking notes. That was a fantastic conversation. Well, I enjoyed it anyway, as per usual. Give us 2 minutes on, as a refresher, as to your services, who you're looking for, who uses your services, and where people can find you. And obviously the links will be in the description.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if you want to just hit me up, I'm on Twitter most times. At Klefeker is my handle, Klefeker. And you can find me on YouTube on How We Life. It's a more kind of day-to-day lifestyle stuff that my wife and I do. And yeah, for sovereignnomad.com, basically I just help you create a strategy. If you're that guy that's in the US and you maybe are a single guy, or you're wanting to start a family, and you want to have kind of an offshore strategy, then I help you build one. And if you're thinking, well, how do I do it with a family? I can help you with that as well.
No one better.
Kind of, how we've done it. And it's actually a lot easier than you think. Or if you just want to have some options and just a couple of passports and residencies in your back pocket, you just want to diversify some of your capital out of the current country that you're at, just for a little bit more stability, and safeguarding some of that capital, then that's kind of what I can help you with.
Yeah, safety, investments, insurance, and optionality. And we covered why some of those examples would have been very handy if you had them over the last 5 to 10 years. Well, thank you so much for joining me again. I can't wait to catch up in a few months and discuss the current state of the world. Wish you and the family a very Merry Christmas. All the best on the new one making its way into the family edition. And for all you guys listening, take care, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the ROI podcast. Thanks, guys. Take care.